Oh my goodness. People keep pouring in.
Here, I got it.
Okay.
I'll watch it from my phone.
Cool.
We have viewership. This is exciting. People want to hear us.
I'm just gonna try to hide that, but I can't. Okay, we'll just start.
Okay. Okay, so updates. Let's talk first about some projects. First one, it's at 678 Ralston Avenue. It's an all affordable project, 100% affordability, 65 residential units. It is proposed at a fairly significant height, about 92 feet in height, 8 stories. They're proposing 19 parking spaces for the project. And I know I'm seeing folks here.
19 for 65 units. Yeah.
Correct.
That is correct.
Wow.
So, let- okay.
Is that public or private parking?
Should we ask the questions after?
Yeah, why don't we ask correct questions after, because I think it's going to be abundantly clear. So this project, do like folks know that the state of California has adopted quite a bit of legislation related to affordable housing, provision of affordable housing, creating opportunities for affordable housing to be proposed and built. This project is an all affordable project, 100%. It's less than a half a mile from the train station. It is subject to and is allowed to be processed under what's called SB 35, which allows for streamlined processing. It was filed in December. We are currently evaluating it right now in concert with the state regulations and state density bonus regulations. So a couple of things that folks should know about SB 35 for that streamlined processing. It requires cities to offer this ministerial review for housing projects if the city has not met its state goal for low-income housing. Belmont is subject to this requirement. We are doing really well on the production of units, including affordable units, but we have not met the very stringent tests for very low and extremely low housing. So we are subject to SB 35 processing. This project does have that opportunity to take advantage of that processing.
Does everyone know what ministerial review means? Because that's a very highfalutin term, but that essentially means it has to be just approved at the staff level. This is not subject to public hearing. It's not subject to any discretionary action.
Correct.
So much easier for it.
Yeah. And by staff review, I mean, we're also staff's not allowed to just be like, nah.
Correct. So it could only be reviewed based on meeting objective standards. We cannot deny the project. We must allow for an accelerated time period. So for example, they filed in December. The city needs to have a decision on its evaluation within 90 days. 90 days. So we're under the gun in terms of how we evaluate the project, address it under the state density bonus law provisions, and meeting these objective standards. They allow these projects, again, 100% affordable, within a half a mile, and they're 0.1 mile away from transit. They're at the property. If you know where the Wendy's is, and then the parking lot next to the Wendy's, it's that parking lot directly east of Wendy's. And they're allowed to go 33 feet above the city's base height for that district, which is 50 feet, which means they can go 33 feet above that. And they have certain components in terms of like parapets and roofs that take the building to about 92 feet. They are requesting standard concessions related to the project. Again, state density bonus allows that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the review needs to be completed within 90 days. We have been working with them to talk about having a stop at our planning commission meeting for a study session in February. We also are working with them to conduct a meeting for the community. So we are going to coordinate with you potentially on the timing of a meeting within the next few weeks. And again, community feedback is not required, nor public hearings are permissible for these kinds of projects. Okay, so with that said, let's keep going to the next.
So can we not ask questions about this particular property now? Or are we waiting to the very, very end?
How do you want to handle that? We should go either way.
I would like to ask questions about this property.
Sure.
And go back to.
Sure.
That's fine, and then we'll go to each one.
Sure.
Maybe can you bring back the other side?
Sure.
This is gonna be an 8-story complex next to Wendy's with 19 parking spots and 65 units. Where are the other 46 units going to be parking?
And you're taking away 60 at least parking spots that are already there, that are full every day.
So,
So what,
It's a valid question. They are permissible to actually propose no parking for this project under state density bonus law. So that's the answer that I could give you in terms of the provisions that are afforded to them under the law. They're allowed to propose a project of this scale with these kinds of development standards being proposed.
As the city fight against the state of the law, jam down these big projects. Because this, to me, is the state basically saying, we don't want to hear what people live in these cities care. We want to force this on you. And by doing this, this allows us to have any real valid opinion or question anything about this at all. It's getting steamrolled right over us because it's a state law that we didn't get to vote on. And this isn't representative of the constituents of the state or any city in the state of California. So we should be fighting this, every city, against this.
So who are we right?
You could write the city of Belmont. Absolutely. You could put comments towards us. Well, sure, well.
I mean, this is a law that was approved by your state legislature, which means your state senators and your state assemblymen. This is not a recent law. So for example, this wasn't approved by your current elected state assembly members. But ultimately, until this law is repealed, this is the law of the land and the city has no option but to approve these projects.
Right.
Do I understand, that they need so many very low housing units as a requirement across the city, is that right?
Correct.
Correct.
How many were put into the Belmont Iceland property?
177 units and 27 of them are affordable.
Okay, so there is.
Correct. There's,
They're not low income.
They're-
They're not low.
Very.
They're low income.
they're low income,
So
correct.
low income is defined as between 60 to 80% of area median income. And then there's categories below that, that's very low income and then extremely low income. Extremely low income, for example, is I think 0 to 30% of area median income. And very
Very
low
low
income
is
goes up to
30 to 50%.
maybe it's 30 to
50%.
50%. And these are all defined by the state.
you know, I would not disagree with this at all. If they were not gonna take 60 spots away and then say, you're also not gonna have spots for 50% of your tenants. That area is so congested already, it's nuts, and there isn't a parking spot.
We hear you. We understand.
We aren't discounting the comments that you have about either the scale of the project, parking, all of the
I
above.
don't mind the housing thing.
Right.
It's, you've got to park, it's just nuts. I mean, I was in that parking lot today, there was not every spot.
We definitely understand that concern. In the pink,
Related to that, I was wondering if there's any consideration given, kind of, maybe I heard this somewhere, I don't know if it's true or not, that when there's a project that has limited housing, is there any consideration like preference to given to residents who don't have cars? Is that taken into consideration at all, or is that? that's
So-
not on the.
often the developer who's going to own and operate it does try to recruit residents that don't have cars, especially when they're in a circumstance like this where they know that there's not going to be offsite parking.
Okay, but it's not like they did the process, it's not an official.
It's not anything the city can require, but it is often the preference of the developer to try to do that to like limit the dissatisfaction of their own tenants.
Thanks.
So we had, the Belmont Iceland, added, we had the sewer added. Tuesday morning,
we've had two significant flood events already. Tuesday morning, when we were having, the rain, Hiller Street was flooded from Wessex Way almost to Biddulph in the mornings. And here we are, we don't even have people in the Iceland yet, and now you're talking more buildings. The infrastructure that was just put in can't even handle what we already are seeing. The lack of foresight and planning is just crazy, absurd.
Agreed.
We probably should not have led with this slide, but that's okay, because we have a
This
big,
is the
this
project
is the
this
project that,
community is most
exactly.
concerned about. So we're here to talk
We're
about
here to
it
talk
in
about
red.
exactly.
Yeah, I'm just, trying to get a sense for SB 35. The requirements kicked in because the city did not meet the requirement on the amount of low-income housing that it provided. So I'm trying to get a sense for the city of Belmont. How many units is it required to provide? How many units between the project on Old County, between the old ice skating rink? How many low-cost housing units has it required? If this gets built, is the city still subject to SB 35, including the 5-story complex that's
Unfortunately, yes, because under the state requirements for, it's called the RENA or Regional
Regional
Housing
Housing
Needs
Needs.
Allocation. Under this current cycle, the city was allocated 1,785 total housing units, and of those, I don't remember the number, but roughly 900 are required to be
Below
low
market.
income
Right.
or below that. And that is something that pretty much no city is able to achieve.
Correct. Many cities are subject to SB 35
Pretty much
process.
every city
How
subject to
many
this.
units has the city of Belmont so far provided projects that are useful?
We've had, it's on a later
Yeah,
slide.
so, keep in mind, the city doesn't build the housing. The city creates the mechanism, the zoning, the opportunities for housing to be built in various areas. We are at the whim of the market in terms of what folks propose. Prior to 2015 to 2017, we had not done much in the way of creating opportunities for housing. Dribs and drabs, a couple single-family homes here and there, accessory dwelling units. When the city adopted its general plan in 2017, its Belmont Village specific plan, climate action plan, we adopted development standards that made it a little more friendly to create the opportunity for housing. Since that time, we have over 500 units of multifamily housing that has been constructed. And you're going to see a couple slides there. A certain percentage of those units are also affordable. And we've been lucky, if you will, because we've had a couple of all affordable projects already built and more on the way, but it still doesn't meet the numbers that we're required to provide based upon the state regional housing needs allocation. Our previous number for our previous housing elements have a cycle, have an 8-year cycle. Our previous number was 485 units. And we had done well to meet those numbers, but our new number of 1,785 and providing a significant percentage of that as affordable, even with all the projects that have been approved, the ones that are under construction, the ones that have been completed, we're still not meeting the numbers that are required by the state. So we're subject to this processing, and keep in mind, Belmont is not alone. Many, many cities are subject to this same streamlined processing.
Pretty much every city.
Right.
Push back. Well, it's a question on this specific.
Yeah.
Development. What is the requirement for an environmental impact report? Kind of getting to Bill's point about concerns about flooding and so on. Is there?
There is not.
There
In
is not a
fact,
requirement.
yeah. In terms of environmental studies.
Repeat the question so that the folks on Zoom can hear it.
Sure. So the question was for this project in particular, because it's a 100% all affordable project, is it subject to environmental review or assessments? Technically, it does not subject to that kind of a requirement. Market rate projects, commercial projects, even certain projects that have a significant percentage of affordable housing may also use state legislation to streamline the environmental review process. But this one in particular, at 100% affordable, it is again, that word ministerial, which means approved at a staff level. There is not input, public hearings, modifications that can be reviewed or assessed as long as they meet the tests for the state density bonus.
Does any other land looked at in Belmont I know it has to be near, but I mean, Walgreens is sitting up there empty, that'd be a heck of a lot better place than putting it there on Ralston.
Well, again, we don't go out and tell an affordable housing developer, pick this site, pick this site, pick that site. They are looking at their own sites. They are looking at opportunities in and around this area. I could tell you that El Camino Real has been a hotspot for housing, Old County Road, and now Ralston Avenue as well. We're also seeing housing potential within the Harbor Industrial Area, along Harbor Boulevard, along with commercial activity. But in terms of saying, we want you to go here, we want you to go there, you should go there, we don't have that discretion to tell them that you must build in this area.
Can you speak to the timeline, what the expectation is to meet the burden of SB 35? Like, within how many years are you expected to have 1,785 units?
8,
8 years?
8 years.
Starting when?
starting last year.
Right.
8 years to approve, not necessarily to have constructed and occupied.
And again, it is a plan. The housing element and meeting the regional housing needs assessment is a plan for the zoning and activities and implementation that allow for the conditions to create the opportunity for housing. But the housing market could change. Folks could say, listen, it's too expensive, don't want to build it, not appropriate. But we are at the whim of market conditions in terms of folks seeking housing on sites in and around the city. So,
I actually want to comment about that because I work for construction. A lot of our developers are actually getting out and they said the ROI is not visible yet. So we're a big company, but we're losing all those projects. And in addition to that, my question is on SB 35. If we don't meet that criteria, do we really care? We have a deficit in California, right? I mean, reading the newspaper and the article, that's not Newsom's priority right now. This affordable housing. So
we would be subject to litigation, in all honesty. If the city said, we disagree with SB 35, we agree with the streamlining provisions, we agree with the mandates that have come from this, we disagree with the mandates, we would be subject to litigation. It's plain.
I'm sure every city in California would be happy to be litigated.
And I could say, having just come from working in the city of San Mateo, where San Mateo had approved 2,000 housing units in their pipeline, they denied one 10-unit project, got sued, and it cost the city a whole lot of money that hit the general fund and goes against things like police and fire and other services, library, which is also covered by the city there. So there are consequences when the city doesn't approve, even if we're otherwise good actors elsewhere.
Right.
You've been waiting so patiently.
Yes.
Yeah, 8 years.
Yeah, this project on Wilson take 8 years?
No, it's not going to take you. No. So-
It will probably take about 3 years before it would be constructed.
Right.
From now.
My question is, I know you mentioned it's an expedited review, it's ministerial, so when do you anticipate it being, there being a study session by the planning commission? And doesn't the planning commission in the city, do they still need to sign off, review the plans, even though it's ministerial in nature?
Well, for one, we're targeting a study session potentially for the second planning commission meeting in February, so February 20th. So second planning commission meeting, which is the third Tuesday. Commission meets first and third Tuesdays, city council second and fourth. We are working with the developer to do a community meeting between now and that February 20th date, so look out for that. But in terms of the project being before the commission, it's more of another community outreach event. It's an opportunity to reach an audience, describe the project, describe what's being proposed, describe the provisions that are afforded them under state law, and allow for comments. But in terms of making project changes, in terms of saying, we don't want 65 units, or we don't agree with the parking, or how can you do this in this area, or why 8 stories? Again, if they're meeting the standards that are afforded to them, the project must advance. And then should it be approval, then they go into the phase of construction permitting, which is also ministerial in nature, but it is things like meeting building code, mechanical code, plumbing code, all of the codes. One thing to keep in mind with these kind of projects as well, they are dependent on funding. And there are times where projects struggle to get funding for their construction. Sometimes they have to go through numerous rounds of funding at a county or state level to try and achieve what they need. It could take years. We actually have a project that, and again, I will get to it later on in the presentation, which is an all affordable project on El Camino Real that has received all of their requisite funding. It's 125 units, and they anticipate breaking ground in spring of this year. But it often takes rounds for folks to get funds to be able to fund the project for construction. So, okay, we'll go that way.
I think for those of us who've lived here for 20 years, and think we're gonna live here for 20, 30, 40 more years, having it take 3 or 4 years to get going doesn't make a big difference, because we're still gonna be living with the traffic. Surely the city of Belmont has a master plan for what we want the city to go up and become, which is part of why we're all sitting here. We want to know what the master plan is. We want to know what the plan is that makes space for people at all income levels, including people who live in these neighborhoods, right, who are paying for houses in these neighborhoods, to live here in this community and enjoy a high quality of life. For the people who are going to move into this all low income building to contribute to our community and also enjoy this very high quality of life. So how long has the city been planning for housing to incorporate all these different strata? Because it isn't anything new. You said the law passed years ago that Belmont had years to work on this, that Belmont has had projects in the pipeline. Or when a new project comes along, like the old ice skating rink, like the project over here on Old County, when those projects come up and Belmont is permitting those builders in those projects, is it always in the plan to get them to include some affordable housing?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
In fact,
then how do we end up with one building that's gonna be all low? Is there nothing already out there for super low affordable housing? What is the plan? 'Cause
there is, so the city's housing element, again, describes a number. It describes a number of units that we need to zone for as part of that housing element cycle. Market rate units, moderate units, below market rate units. And the city creates the zoning, but the market conditions again drive where it occurs and when it occurs. We consider ourselves to have been good actors over the last number of years related to creating the climate for housing to be proposed and built. As I said, going back about 10 years ago, we had not been doing a lot. In fact, our policies were of the kind that limited the opportunities for development, low development standards, really small heights, not allowing what's called floor area ratios to exceed a certain number that allow for the climate for buildings to then pencil out density-wise. Again, we've had the 2 projects that you mentioned, the one at the ice rink, 177 units. The city also has what's called an inclusionary housing ordinance, which requires 15% of the units for any project that is over 25 units, they've got to provide 15% of them on site. So for the 177 units for the ice rink site, they provided 27 units of affordable housing. For the Artisan Crossings project, 1300 block of El Camino, that's 250 units. 38 of those units are affordable. Keep in mind that the 15% number, developers can propose a certain number that would be moderate income, low income, very low income. Statutorily, they are required to provide low income units. And we're getting a nice share of low income units, a nice share of moderate income units. What we're not getting a lot of, now we're starting to, is very low and extremely low units. We're not meeting those numbers yet of getting those projects with those low income, those extremely low income numbers. So we're subject to that processing. And again, we are.
I do just want to clarify, when we're talking about very low income and low income, that sounds really alarming.
Right.
But given the very high, the median income in this county is $150,000. That's 100% of area median income for a family of four. And when you're talking about people at 30% or even 50% of area median income, these are people that are still making $40,000 a year. They're not necessarily homeless people that are moving into your community. They are people with jobs. They can be, maybe teachers make more than that, but secretaries or part-time workers at your schools, they qualify for that housing. Medical workers at the San Mateo County Medical Center or local hospitals, they qualify for these units. So I just want to keep that in mind, that the terminology sounds scarier than really it is in terms of the population that these serve. Sorry to cut you off.
No, absolutely.
Guys, it's like 5 questions from people on Zoom. Can I ask some questions?
Sure.
Sorry. So the first question from Zoom is, for ministerial housing projects, particularly in currently industrial and commercial areas that allow mixed use, what regulations are projects subject to regarding subsurface hazardous materials? Are any of these sites under state oversight, including the Regional Water Board or DTSC?
I can tell you that these projects typically prepare what's called a phase 1 and a phase 2 environmental assessment so that they understand what the toxic conditions may be for the property. So they certainly have to do that as part of their evaluations, part of their pro forma. But in terms of the environmental review requirement for a project to kind of check a box that it meets all the environmental assessment requirements, all affordable projects don't go through that level of review.
But if there is contamination
It
on the
has to be-
site,
it has
it
to
is
be.
still under the oversight of
Of
those state regulatory
Correct.
agencies for the
Correct.
contamination.
Correct.
And oftentimes it sort of depends, like, for example, this project is not putting the parking underground, it's at the surface level. So there's mitigations that can be done, like the tapping the soil so that they're not necessarily disturbing the soil or exposing the residents of that property to
Correct.
hazardous materials.
And then the other question is, SB 35 allows for incentives and concessions, but isn't there still room for negotiating public benefits? I understand the city cannot disapprove the projects as a whole. Can you talk about community benefit?
Yes, they can seek concessions. They can seek concessions, waivers, and incentives, but if they meet objective standards for a project, then then a community benefits discussion doesn't come into play. Again, at an all affordable level, community benefits aren't something that is required, nor in the city requires part of a project.
And typically 100% affordable would be considered a community benefit.
And then the last question, and this might be one more for the developer. With all of these low-income units, seems like you need to have supportive services. Is that being considered?
It depends on the population for these projects. Sometimes these affordable projects can include some special needs populations, and if they do, they typically have supportive services on site. But they could just be family housing that's serving, families that don't make a high wage, that don't necessarily require any additional services. But most of these projects typically have a community room and they have like tutoring for the students and childcare or other things for the residents. So they do offer some level of services for their resident population. In the back in gray.
Yeah, I think, to this lady's point in front of me, we're not complaining or concerned about low income, super low income. That's not the point. We want to be open and inclusive. Our point is that the infrastructure of the city, as it stands right now, and in the foreseeable future, does not support the additional building that's going on. To the point that my husband made about the sewage system, that's a problem. To the point about traffic, particularly getting in and out of these neighborhoods in East Belmont, that is hugely problematic. I have been at multiple city council meetings and planning meetings over the years talking about traffic and traffic safety. It is not safe to even cross Hiller Street. 6 cars went by tonight before I could cross the street to go for a walk. So that is what we are here. And I want to be laser focused on that. It is not about excluding people having safe homes in our community. It is about the infrastructure that everybody, the new folks moving in, as well as those of us who are currently here, are very concerned about. And we feel that it falls on deaf ears. And it's hidden behind, well, the state says we have to do it and therefore we must.
So the city is well aware, and it is a challenge that we are working on to address the existing infrastructure deficiencies that are in the city that have been here before the development even has come into play. This has been a challenge that every city faces with declining revenues from property taxes and other sources. And it is a challenge we are working really hard to overcome. There are development impact fees that every new development has to pay that do go for things like sewer infrastructure and traffic improvements and all of that. And so new development does help to fund some of these pre-existing deficiencies that you're talking about. Is it enough to fix everything that needs to be fixed in the city? Absolutely not. And that is a challenge that every city in the state faces.
Do they have to pay development impact fees
Yes.
Yes.
for this development?
They
Yes.
do.
They're subject to all of the traffic improvement, park fees, sewer connection fees, all of that.
In purple?
So I just wanted to echo, my neighbor, because we're all neighbors here, sentiment that I am not, against low housing or even the super low housing. It's more, I'm horrified at the look of the buildings that I see up there and the lack of parking. And along the plan of what was described before, is if this actually got passed in 2015, have we been getting enough of this low and super low units in? I understand developers propose, but I don't think that we've gotten enough if we're now looking at this 8 or 9 story building that's all affordable and low, the lowest. And then my follow-up question is, if it does get built and the infrastructure doesn't support it, the sewer, the roads, what have you, like, what's the plan? Because when it breaks and it's catastrophic, that is a lot more. When you have sewer spilling out, you're then paying emergency fees. You're not paying plan ahead fees.
Well, the last time it flooded, it was neighbors in the street with making dams to divert water
So,
and
yeah.
calling and getting nothing. And then later on in the day, oh, well, we were up on the hills. Again, it's East Belmont, always neglected, and it's the second rate version of it.
So I just want to note that infrastructure and public works is a huge piece that I think we all want to address. And I do want to note that Peter Brown had reached out directly before this meeting tonight to see if he could join us because he knew that these were going to be questions. We know that there's so much just about these projects that I made the decision to request that he come in March so that we can really focus and discuss those issues in detail. There's so much just to help people understand kind of why this project is happening and what these next steps are that we wanted to start there. But we definitely, in terms of the infrastructure and in terms of public works and the flooding and the streets and all of that, there's so much more there that we definitely need to discuss. But I want to be able to do that when we have Peter Brown as our Director of Public Works here so that we can have a more constructive discussion in terms of like what can actually be done. Okay, so if we can hold like those questions and then plan to have more of that discussion in March, I think that would just help just because I do realize we have a lot and there's so many other developments as well. Okay.
And if we have 90 days,
I know.
talking March.
I understand.
And I just want to say that we do have master plans for infrastructure, identifying all the needs and all that needs to be repaired. I would be lying if I said we had the money to do all of it that needs to be done, but Peter will get into more of that at our meeting in March. So would you like us to go through more of the projects? Maybe just
Keep
do
going.
these two more questions that are
Just
here?
really fast. Do you know if you're planning for the ground floor, commercial, residential, neither?
It'll be the parking podium and then the residential, the ground floor.
So they're not there. With this variant.
No. So it's gonna be like the
So
management.
No, is it gonna be on the dry cleaning hub?
It's the dry cleaner,
With the restaurant?
Green cleaners.
it's the dry cleaner and the parking lot next.
Next to it. So it's the dry cleaner and then the parking lot next to it, but not the back parking lot.
Not the Chinese restaurant either.
Correct. So it's not, yeah,
It's a very small parcel.
right.
That's why it's.
That's why, right.
City could eminent domain training for. Or make a much smaller project, it wouldn't be so high, that's the same size lot as where you're trying to develop.
You might just build a 8-story project across both lots.
Love that.
Okay, so how about 2 more questions? And then we can move on, because we have like 25 slides and it's really interesting stuff. We aren't going to be, because there's exciting things happening, hopefully.
I understand that this is, you guys can't do anything about it. Even though every other house, if we want to do anything, we have to bare our soul and every, you get 400 feet, we have to put another car space on our car or a double car garage. But this is not, doesn't apply to this property at all.
Parking does not apply to projects that are 100% affordable and within a half a mile of transit. AB 2097, also look up that. There's actually legislation that allows developers to go into commercially zoned properties, and then if they meet the tests for provision of affordable housing, again, it creates another streamlined opportunity.
What was that again, AB what?
AB 2097, look that one up as well. There's a lot of legislation. Okay, last question. Okay,
Governor Brown and Governor Weiner in 2016 created this SB 95, or 35, whatever it is. You had mentioned the word share. 850 Masonic, Old County Road, the Hayden Project, Harbor, next to Safeway, by the vans. Does anybody see any sharing going on except for Homeview and Sterling View? Sharing of where the projects will be built? Yeah, it's all this.
In terms of the city,
sure. Well,
It's down here only to me?
Can you repeat the question?
yeah, so I think the question is, and maybe I'm going to paraphrase your question, is why are the developments happening within this area of the city? Yes. We get development projects proposed all over town now. There are projects of a higher density, higher scale, higher intensity that have been in and around this transit area. It is the area where we anticipate the greatest level of redevelopment. Because you have commercially zoned properties, you have properties that are not built to the hilt. You don't have, for example, because this actually came out and was discussed as part of our housing element last year, is how come there's not more multifamily housing projects being built in the west part of town? We actually have a lot of apartment projects there. And the displacement of those kinds of projects, the profitability, if you will, or the how a project pencils out to take, let's say, a 35-unit apartment building and then say, want to propose a 100-unit apartment building, that doesn't work. Now, when you have a commercially zoned property, 1 or 2 stories, easier to purchase. You don't have to relocate residents because there are requirements for that as well. If folks were to take a piece of property and then change it to something else. This is where we anticipate the development occurring in and around El Camino Real. So when I use the term share, and I'm not sure if I did, but this is where we anticipate it happening. And again, we're going to cite some examples of projects that have been approved, projects that have been constructed, projects that have been completed within this area. And again, prior to 2017, the zoning that we had in place in and around El Camino Real, the Belmont Village specific plan area, did not have standards that were reasonable enough to allow for reasonable levels or even larger intensity levels of development. These kinds of changes have, without a doubt, have spurred development. Absolutely, you can see it. But it's now taking the city from a place where we were not the best of actors in creating the opportunities for housing to creating those opportunities.
Detail on the scale said over here about what are the things that they could build. Alexander Park and the Homeview Park are so small that we don't have any nice community areas to congregate. Those are the 2 little pieces of property we have for open space. That's it. And then we're having an 8-story building and the complex on that county.
This really the last question?
I don't speak for everyone here, but,
Okay.
and this is Caroline first, I just think that there's a tremendous amount of development when you look at this collectively, and I would like to see some of the community benefits that are discussed and negotiated with the city to be primarily focused in this area, because it doesn't necessarily seem like they have been. We have tremendous issues with our roads. We could use better parks. I mean, talk about traffic safety. It's terrifying to cross Ralston with my kids every day. There are so many ways that are direct areas where these housing units are being built that we could benefit, and I'd like to see it focused in our area instead of being pushed off to other areas.
Duly noted.
All right, move on.
Okay. Can we go to the next slide? Okay.
Cover that.
We've covered that one, and we don't want to talk about SB 35 anymore, right? Okay, let's go. Okay, boy, here we go. You guys are aware of this project, 580 Masonic. It has been proposed again by the Prometheus Group. If folks were aware, this project's been around for a few years. They previously filed in 2020, 2021. They were incomplete. There was a lot of components of the project that didn't meet compliance tests and completeness tests. As folks know, they ran into some issues related to their codes, covenants, and restrictions that affected their property, as well as some 45 to 47 other properties. They went through a long, protracted process of trying to get voluntary support from the folks that were affected to say, yes, we can agree to have those codes, covenants, and restrictions eliminated. That was not successful on their end. They went the legal route. They received a judgment. That judgment was in support of removing those codes, covenants, and restrictions. And now they're allowed to propose their project again, which they filed a few months ago. It's under review now. It's less than half a mile from a train station. They are proposing the project at 5 stories, 60 feet. There are components of the project that go above 60 feet, but that's like the roof parapet and the screening for the mechanical. But the component of the project, the main face of the project, is proposed at 60 feet. Because they are half a mile from a train station, they are proposing 15% of the units as affordable, but a certain percentage of those units they're proposing at that very low level. Further state legislation allows them, if they propose a certain amount of those units at that very low level, it allows them to seek things like development concessions and waivers and incentives. They are proposing 139 units and they're proposing, well, 137 parking spaces. So a little less than 1-to-1. Because again, of that state legislation, also that same one that I mentioned, AB 2097, they're a half a mile from transit. They technically do not have to provide, they can provide no more or are required to provide no more than a half a space per unit. They're providing a little more than that, but again, they're using the tools of state density bonus related to their project. They are proposing some measure of commercial space, about 3,000 square feet. So it's
Bigger than twice of these rooms, 2 of these rooms worth?
2 of these rooms are, yeah. Right, so they're proposing on the ground floor, cafe and co-work space. They're proposing on the corner, on the Hiller and the Masonic corner, as you go around, they're proposing about 3,000 square feet of like a community access garden as well. They are currently under review. The project is incomplete at this time. We're certainly evaluating it based upon state laws as well. We don't anticipate that the project is going to be ready for public hearings until the end of the year. We're still going to do our review of the project for the environmental assessment. They are required to prepare an environmental assessment for the project. So we're still a number of months away before this project would daylight. Other things, again, 5 stories, 60 feet, any other things to, describe? Again, they are going to be seeking the tool of state legislation for certain aspects of their project. Things like ground floor units proposed at residential, and you need a conditional use permit for that. Glazing requirements for windows, the way the building is to be designed, it kind of typically our codes required to be like a wedding cake design, where it kind of has like a 2-story component, then it has to step back at other floors. As you can see, they aren't proposing that. They have the tool of state legislation to seek concessions and waivers to certain objective design standards for the project. So the project is back. It's under review. They are required to have public hearings. They are required to have outreach to the community. I'm hoping that that's going to occur soon. They're in the review cycle for the city for it. So knowing we're probably going to get, 25 hands up. Let's start over back there.
Yeah, what is the city going to do regarding the congestion on Masonic, Wessex, and Hiller, right by the Arky station and the current property? I've invited people to come to my front yard at 7 Hiller Street any number of times. Nobody is taking me up on this. At about 8:24 in the morning to see the traffic that is backed up from beyond Biddulph down south on Hiller to Ralston. Try getting out of there in the morning or getting home in the evening.
So that is one of the topics that Peter Brown is going to be able to cover at the next meeting.
You know what? That is a divide and conquer issue that the city always has. These people can handle that. These people handle this. I want to know right now what the city is planning on doing, what studies are being conducted to ensure that we can actually, and I'm including the people that are going to be moving in, the 139 units, that we can actually drive our cars in our neighborhood. Now, Art, I want to know now, what is the city doing?
So they're required to prepare a traffic study. It's under evaluation by the city to confirm whether the test, the conclusions are sound. They do have to pay a traffic improvement fee, just like the other impact fees that the project has to pay. Keep in mind that we are challenged by the existing conditions of the city related to the street pattern that we have. That's part of the exercise of evaluating projects, determining their fair share impact, and how the city receives funds and opportunities to improve conditions, whether it's signal timing, whether it's other components, other changes. But developers, again, market rate developers, have to have solutions and have to have sound traffic evaluation studies to confirm where fixes could occur. I don't have the answer for you exactly how Hiller is going to change to the. Sure, sure.
Same issue of traffic safety in these neighborhoods way before 580 Masonic developers decided to buy that property. That is why we are so irate. We keep getting the brush off. So I'm glad that we're going to do a traffic study. There was supposed to be a traffic study done for when Nesbit added a middle school. There was a traffic study that, you know, has been done for years. We put bumpers and took those out, and we've done this and that. We call, we complain, we are asking, begging for the city to help us, and we feel unheard. We feel unheard, and you're gonna keep hearing from all of us, because it's not right. If I cannot cross my street looking both ways and making sure that no cars are coming, we have a problem, and somebody is gonna get hurt.
I even invite you, come spend a week in my house. I'll meet out of my office, and you can see it.
Come see the traffic.
My question is, how did they rezone this without any public input? This was not zoned for residential. It got rezoned without any notification of anybody directly affected by it. They did the minimal amount of notification. Now, we have to deal with front of it. So none of us in Sterling Downs were notified that you were rezoning this commercial only property. And it had a 2.5 height restriction on the CCNRs, which have been in place for 50 years. Over 50 people signed something saying, we'd like to keep these CCNRs. And the person who was trying to keep this, to change the zoning, it was known to have paid people who live in that area to sign off on it $3,000. So he bribed people in that community to say, please sign off on this. He threatened them either with lawsuits, because I talked to these people, they either got threatened with lawsuits, he was gonna take them to court, anybody who didn't sign it, or, so you got, instead of the stick, you got the carrot. So he threatened them with lawsuits, or he said, I'll give you $3,000. So some people got $3,000, some people got threatened with lawsuits. That's how this got changed. With this legal.
I'm going to politely disagree with you on that aspect.
Well, I spoke with many people.
Okay,
because of the
so-
city council.
Let's go back to 2014 to 2017, and I lived it. I was part of the project management team for the city's comprehensive general plan update, Belmont Village specific plan, and climate action plan. We had numbers of community meetings, a website. Absolutely had meetings with the Sterling Downs community. I participated in them. We had community meetings at City Hall. We had pop-ups at Safeway, at Farmers Market. We tried our level best to allow the opportunity for folks to comment on their general plan being amended, on their Belmont Village specific plan being created. And it did talk about the development standards. We have a website that I beg of you to go to the city's website and look at the actions and activities that went through that project. We did not take it lightly at all.
There's nothing on it that says you invite us to Sterling Downs. It's Harbor View and Sunny Street.
It was, so I will, just as I know that this has come up a lot, so Sterling Downs, and I'm sure Homeview too, were reached out to as part of that. In terms of notifying people, right, like we always can only do our best in terms of sending emails and trying to notify people about what's going on. That was 9 years ago, and so in terms of like how many people we had on top, I do just want to note that like, I know for sure that I have sent out those emails.
I recognize
and-
folks
and
from this
tried-
room that
So-
participated
So,
in some of those discussions.
so unfortunately, like Belmont Village specific plan was voted, it is there, we've referenced it in numerous meetings that this is the plan that's for that area. So, and just because we have so many projects, I'm happy to go over that piece specifically with you, Mike, so that we
Sorry, I
can
missed those.
kind of do that. And then I can just, but I just know we have so many things and I have other, like the people on Zoom who also have questions. So I'm trying to balance like making sure that we can keep the conversation going so that all this information, I know it's a lot to take in. But I really, like, for some things that have already, like, I'm happy to provide that clarification, but if we could do it after the meeting, I'm happy to do that. Okay?
Now, this one is not a higher fee. This one we can protest on, correct?
This project, while it does provide its level of affordable housing and units at very low income levels, it is subject to discretionary approval by the city. It is subject to development standards that are established, but again, there is kind of an interplay here. So there's discretion, but there's also state legislation that is interwoven as part of their ask. So, but yes, there are going to be public hearings for it, an environmental review for it, all of those things that would typically be required for a project of.
Sure, again, and this is something, we just put the ice rink, we just put this, the amount of cars right now. It took my husband this morning to get over to give somebody a ride on Industrial. 15 minutes from Homeview to get across, he waited, the traffic, the lights are all messed up. I know they're fixing those, they're going to fix that up. But we've got so many new people, so many new housing developments that we're getting, and now we're getting one shoved down our throat. And now this one, I just don't know if this is something, I really want to make sure that we're contacted and know about it.
So thank you, because you pointed out the very difficult traffic patterns we have in Belmont, right? We're working with the existing road and the existing structure. And with that in mind, the fact that Ralston Avenue is the pipeline for the entire city, back and forth to the middle school, the high school, the freeways, the everything. So while I'm really glad that these community associations told me to have this meeting, the truth is anybody living in Belmont needs to know this is going on, because anything that happens on this chunk of Ralston Avenue affects every single person who lives in Belmont.
Weekdays, weekends, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I'm not minimizing, I mean, there's 35 to 40,000 cars that go up and down Ralston or north and south on El Camino. It's a high traffic area. Absolutely.
We may feel it in a different way than anybody else does. But it affects every single person who lives in Belmont.
So, the one thing that I think is a major flaw with development impact fees, and where a model, which other agencies use, that directly require developers to mitigate as a condition of their project, where there's a huge difference is with that model, they have to implement the improvements that offset their development. With the whole model of development impact fees, it's money that goes into a pot. So basically what happens is development gets built, all the impacts are felt with nothing to offset it. And hopefully the city decides in their pot of development impact fees to try to figure out something to offset those impacts. But the city is then balancing between all of its other needs. So a much better model is to say, which is what San Mateo County required for many, many years, is that if you are developing the space, you have to go ahead and also build the offsets that fix the traffic impacts, the greater impacts of additional storm drain facilities, lacking storm drain facilities. Essentially, the project, if it brings it up above a certain threshold, needs to offset it. And that's an example. So it feels like it's really a negative on the outcome of a project to say afterwards we'll have some money and maybe we'll put it on.
So when projects get approved, there's sort of two sets of fees or things that they pay. They do have to pay the mitigations immediate to their project. So they do that. So projects that occur often have to construct traffic improvements immediately around them. And in addition to that, they pay into the impact fees. So they're paying both. And the impact fees are very specific to, so traffic impact fees have to be spent on traffic improvements and can't get diverted to pay for police officers or library services. Park impact fees go into a fund to pay for updating park facilities. So there are some protections in place. It does sometimes take a while for the city to generate enough funds in any of those impact funds to make significant improvements. As an example, to address flooding in some areas, sometimes those improvements cost like $40 million. And it takes a while to build up the bank to have that money to actually do the improvement. So there are some incremental improvements that occur with each development. A lot of the impacts you're talking about pre-exist the developments going in. Like the ice rink project is not yet occupied. So I know, and you have every right to be concerned about the increase in traffic once those people are there, but then not being able to get out of your driveway today and being stuck in the intersections today is from the existing residents that already live there. And the new development under state law is not required to fix everything that's wrong in the city that preceded it happening. Right? It just,
Yeah, but
we've never built anything anymore.
But our city elected officials should be paying attention to it, and we don't feel, as we've stated for years, that they have. Current and past administrations, full stop.
And so, what I would say, in San Mateo County, if a project brought the level of service on traffic from a level B to a level C, right? It brought it over a certain threshold in that development. And I understand the cumulative development, but that development then would have been required to build the offsets, not to put money into an account for those projects to, or improvements to eventually be built. And so where you're chasing your tail is you first develop, cause the problems, and then afterwards look at offsetting those with some improvements. Instead of having a project where the developer builds something, and with that building, he also goes ahead and constructs the offsets to go ahead and mitigate the impact of the development.
So what I was saying is that they are required to do that. They do that.
Correct.
Not only do they construct the mitigations for their project, but in addition to that, they pay into a pot for future other citywide improvements.
Dollars per unit.
So
for
it
example.
is already the practice. But again, they're mitigating their differential
Their fair
and they're
share.
not fixing the problems that have existed before their project got built.
So what were the mitigations on the two projects that are nearly complete, right? They're not occupied yet, we're not seeing the traffic, but the ice skating rink and, Artist Crossing, still not open. What have they done to mitigate the project that's not open? What have those three things contributed to mitigate the increasing traffic?
So, for example, there's been sewer line upgrades as opposed to for both of those projects. Funds towards improvement for traffic signals, impact fees that they pay per unit that goes into that capital improvement fund for future projects. So it's both the pro forma difference between the impact that they create and then a dollar amount, say, that then they are required to put into a fund or actually fund an improvement of, let's say, a city asset. So like Kathy said, let's say that they've got to pay a traffic improvement fee of X dollars per unit, whether it's $5,000 per unit or $10,000 per unit, that's their impact. Then the project in and of itself has a mitigation for their fair share contribution for the impact that they create. So that's a fee that they pay or actually rolled into infrastructure improvements that they have to actually construct. So you'll see developers that are going to fund, like, for example, a project that we're going to get to in our harbor industrial area. Again, it's in the unincorporated county area, but it's a project that the city is evaluating. A biotech project, they're actually going to fund the upgrade of a sewer line along the entirety of Harbor Boulevard to address the issues related to their fair share impacts and provide the mechanism to accommodate potential future development also on harbor that they would then pay into a reimbursement fund for that infrastructure improvement, going from, let's say, a 10-inch sewer line to a 16-inch sewer line. So it's that kind of exercise that we go through.
We have to go.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, so there are people who've been waiting to ask
Sure.
questions from Zoom, so can I
Sure.
read it off like? so?
Yeah.
So the questions from Zoom are really about clarity in terms of the timing for the CEQA review and really understanding what that is and when people can comment about like impact specifically for this project, concerns about the driveway access that's right on Hiller and how that will work for this development. So can you talk about that timeline for everybody?
Sure. So as I indicated earlier, we anticipate public hearings occurring to the end of the year. But in advance of that, there's an environmental study that has to be prepared for the project. Depending upon its level, there's going to be multiple public outreach opportunities for folks to comment on a draft environmental study and then the final study for the project. Typically, there's 30 to 45-day notice periods for once that study is released and folks can bring their comments. Cities will often hold hearings on the draft study to also provide an opportunity for folks to put their comments in person. But there are going to be a couple of opportunities for that project for folks to weigh in on their concerns related to whether it's parking, traffic, sewer, other infrastructure that is associated with that kind of a project. So in terms of giving you timing, the project is incomplete at this point. We're still reacting. I mean, the applicant is responding to comments that the city has given to them, and they're going to be providing it to us. And then we're going to start to bring on the environmental folks to start doing their initial research and work. We don't anticipate anything in terms of environmental noticing for the project at a draft stage until like summer of this year at the earliest. But we'll notify folks. We'd ask that if you want to be on a list, also folks within 300 feet of this project automatically get notice to any public hearings for the project, whether it's for the entitlements review or the environmental review.
And then the other question, sorry, was in terms of the mitigations that were mentioned earlier, a lot was about the sewer upgrades, and then you did mention the traffic lights, but can you specifically talk about other traffic related mitigations that have been made through these two development projects as examples for people here?
I'd have to go back and look at the project approvals. I don't have them memorized in terms of there was a signal improvement or there was a crosswalk improvement or sidewalk improvements or other improvements. We'd have to go back. I mean, was not prepared for the chapter and verse. What did they actually do for each of those two developments? But again, they have to pay impact fees and they have to mitigate for their fair share impacts that they create. And that's manifested typically in improvements that they make to certain, whether it's intersections, lights, sidewalks, bike lane, all of the.
How do we join? Is it like for all major development projects, the project by project, how do we join if we're not within the 300 feet?
So we actually have a sign up that you can do through the city's main website to get on the list for all public hearings. I could give you my business card as well. You guys know where to find me. Obviously, I've been around. Folks have seen me in other meetings, but www.belmont.gov is our main page. And then I don't have the URL in front of me in terms of, but if you type in public notification or public notification lists, you could sign up for those alerts when any of our agendas are published, or actually any of the city council meetings, any of the planning commission meetings, or if you've got a specific interest on a certain project, you can do that as well.
Can I just suggest that, I know the requirement is notifying within 300 feet of a project, but when you know that people within a quarter mile of that project are really going to be interested in, I think it would be really wise for the Belmont to go ahead and do that additional outreach. Go 2,000 feet out because you know these people are going to be interested instead of just the minimum of 300. Because I can tell you, within 300 feet of this project, that hardly touches anybody. There are a handful of people in that group. It's such a small area. So please think beyond the requirements to what makes sense for the community.
Thank you.
Sorry. Megan, but also, can I make a plug too to encourage folks to join our email list for Sterling Downs and Homeview as well, so that we can amplify when these things are coming up. It is a cost. I mean, Kristen was walking almost every day this week in the rain, trying to make sure that every business knew about tonight's meeting. It's very resource intensive to get the word out. But if you all can really help by talking to your neighbors and getting them to join these email lists as well, so that we can really help to amplify it too. Yes, there's more that we'd love to see the city do. I don't want to discount that. And there's also a lot that we can do by encouraging people to join our email list, get involved in the association, read your emails. And I honestly try only to keep like Sterling Downs emails to like these types of things. Okay, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Laura.
With the way the structure is right now, how do we even mitigate traffic on Ralston? And all in this flood, all this area, it's a flood of cars every morning, every evening, and throughout the day. How do we even mitigate that? I mean, you can't mitigate, you can't, oh, we're gonna make it a 10-lane, freeway, I mean, almost. Because it's impacted, and then you don't have enough parking places, and we know from all the other cities what happens. I mean, even the 49ers, when they built it, they go everywhere, and there's already no parking. So, I mean, I know the state requires us to be able to do it, but there, it's impacting everyone's life. It's miserable.
Not to send us to March when we're your next meeting, but we could spend a whole meeting talking about infrastructure, parking, traffic, sewer, storm drain, streets, sidewalks, crosswalks. A lot of it needs to be fixed, absolutely. And we've been at it for a number of years, and it's not enough. You folks remember Measure I that was passed like 5-6 years ago? That half-cent or quarter-cent sales tax? That turned out to be, I mean, we're generating about $1 million to $1.5 million a year, I believe, in funds that can go towards infrastructure improvement and fixes. But it's clearly not enough. We're dealing with decades and decades of infrastructure that is needing to be upgraded, and the city doesn't have the capital to do it. We have to search for ways to make it happen. And whether it's through Measure I, whether it's through other grants, whether it's through developer contributions, dare I say that, but it's part of a large scale solution that's needed to address the ills of the past. And so,
Association.
yes.
8:30.
Yeah, can I?
Right, right.
If you guys are, how much time do you guys have?
We have to,
We can stay.
we can stay.
Okay.
My
Yeah.
Thursday night was booked here. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. So, yes, yeah. So, can we go beyond 580 Masonic? Yeah, cool. Let's do the next one. Hey, the housing element.
That's me.
You're up.
Okay, these are really quick slides.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys are all aware, we're part of that housing element development process. We submitted an updated draft we originally, the city adopted a housing element in January of 2023, and we were really hopeful that we had done a great job. That we have so much development happening, how could the state not approve our housing element? But they didn't. And we got a comment letter from them back in April. Due to some transition in staff, it took us about 6 months to respond. We submitted again in October, got another comment letter in December that said, smaller letter, fewer things that were not quite there. So we are working regularly and meeting with the housing department of the state to try to work through the remaining comments. They've told us that they feel we're really close. The things we need to do is do a better job explaining the sites we already have included in our housing element and be more consistent with how we're applying the density across the sites. We weren't really using a formula and applying the same density sort of everywhere as an estimate. I think the person who was handling it before us was really looking more on a site-by-site basis. And we just need to sort of follow their methodology. We can do this, and all this can happen without us adding additional sites. So we're not going to reopen that conversation about looking at more sites in your neighborhood. This can all happen within the existing sites, within the housing element. It's just approaching them in a different way and analyzing them a little bit differently than we did before. We hope to resubmit in the spring, and hopefully this will be our 4th submittal to the state, and hopefully this will be it, and we'll get approval at that point in time. Some of you are likely aware that we brought forward some zoning amendments to the city council related to the housing element this past Tuesday. These were things that were proposed in the housing element going back to the January 2023 version of the housing element, of changes that were needed in the CMU zoning district and the Village Station corridor district. That looked at increasing the maximum floor area ratio and also eliminating the residential density. Staff had included a height increase in the corridor mixed use district that was proposing a 5-foot increase to allow for some ground floor commercial to be more able to be accommodated within the housing projects. The city council and the planning commission, based on community concerns that were raised, has decided to defer that discussion. So it is not included in these zoning amendments that are going forward. It's not necessary for our housing element approval or conformance with the state. So the final zoning amendments are going to be approved at a special meeting of the city council on Tuesday. And the height is not in there anymore. That has been taken out. I am also have the honor of handling the cannabis program for the city. So back in November, the city council.
You have a team.
And team.
We're together.
The city council moved forward and approved what we call a framework that allows them to consider allowing cannabis in the city. So before it was just flat out prohibited, they've created an area of the city, which is on El Camino between O'Neill and the San Carlos border. Just the parcels fronting El Camino, where they said essentially, we may consider cannabis here, and we would allow properties to ask to be rezoned to this special cannabis overlay district. Now, in order to make sure that it's not a first come, first served thing, and whoever's fastest and has the most money gets through, we set up a proposal process to pre-qualify businesses. We're not allowing any more than 2 to come in, and maybe not even 2, maybe only 1. And so that process is underway. Proposals were due today. We have 4 retail businesses that are interested in vying for those possible 2 opportunity spots. And if they're selected by city staff, then they have to go through a whole extensive community process like any development project. They have to apply to be rezoned. They have to have public community meetings. They have to go to the planning commission. They have to go to the city council, and there'll be plenty of opportunity for the public to weigh in on those. And the city can ultimately say, nah, we don't actually want cannabis after all.
Well, that'd be good if they just said that, and not let these people even apply.
I do feel like this is back to that 300-foot rule. You know, when the 300-foot rule was out in this community, the word got out to way more than 300 feet because we all cared about the cannabis that was being set up. I suspect a lot of us would have cared about this also. 300 feet isn't enough for notification.
But why is the city even considering having cannabis in the city? It's not healthy for people. I mean, there are some people that need it, okay, but they can get it. Why would Belmont want to be selling cannabis in our city? That just doesn't even make sense to me. It's medically not good for the brain. It alters it. I knew someone who he's dead from it. It was a gateway drug. It alters the brain. People don't want to work when they're on it. I mean, I can understand medical use for pain, Well, why would we want to have it here in Belmont? Why would Belmont even be considered? Is it lucrative? And what's the reason?
So it is already, it's legal in the state of California, and it is legal to be delivered to any residents in the state of California. So what these changes allow is that Belmont can have a retail storefront that sells it. It is a regulated retail storefront in terms of like, there's only, people of a certain age are only allowed in. So you have to be at least 18, I think 21 under most circumstances. This is not a medical marijuana. And it is true, it does create some revenue for the city. We get, when it's just delivered to your house, we don't get the sales tax from it. If we have a storefront where people can go browse in person, or it's delivered from that storefront, then we do benefit from the sales tax of that. So, the debate about whether or not it makes sense for Belmont did occur at the city council level. Again, no business has been approved, and there can be further public debate when an actual business at an actual location is coming forward for its approval process.
Well, why even offer it? It doesn't make sense. It's not healthy for the community. It's not, is this something you want your children to do? When you
This again was a city council initiative.
and federally, it is illegal still. It's still illegal. Even though the state of California.
If I may, I participated in the city council meeting where they heard the public's response to the cannabis zoning, and I think there was like 70 or 80 people that spoke under public comment, and there were people on both sides of the argument. And so council had the difficult job of weighing that and weighing the potential revenue benefits. A lot of folks that were in District 1 spoke out very strongly against any retail or distribution locations on Ralston and Oak County.
City took that, right?
Because of the proximity to Nesbit and just residential homes. And so I think council's solution to try and find an alternate area where this could be something that came to fruition in the future was some way to compromise. But like Kathy said, like this will come before the council again. There will be more public opportunities to weigh in.
So we can go through really quickly other development projects that are occurring, and we do have some slides on the harbor industrial area.
Okay, and thank you for that in terms of providing clarification. Again, this was before the council in 2022. There was a number of other areas that were under consideration for these overlay districts, both North and South El Camino Real, North and South Oak County Road, Ralston Avenue, Shoreway Road. And the council took the public input seriously during that time and took it seriously again in 2023. And they decided, based upon all of that, South El Camino Real from O'Neill to San Carlos appeared to be the most appropriate opportunity for it, and also was responsive to the concerns. But again, as Kathy said, nothing has been approved yet. We've just completed the review process for it, or in terms of the application submittal process, and there's a lot of public review that's necessary going forward. Okay, let's go on to projects. Projects that have been approved, occupied. I think I mentioned a couple of them earlier. First one is Firehouse Square. That's 81 units of housing. I know it says 66, but we didn't include the 15 townhomes. So it's 66 affordable units there, as well as 15 market rate townhomes. Those affordable units have been occupied for well over like 9 months to a year now. And the first sale of the 15 townhomes actually has occurred today. The next project, as you go like from up to down, you've got the Hayden, the 815 Old County Road, former ice rink property, 177 units. They're starting to get ready for occupancy right now. Again, 27 of those units will be affordable. And then you've got Artisan Crossings, 250 units, 38 of them, I believe, are affordable. It does include some bike kitchen repair space, community space for kind of art classes. They were subject to a development agreement with the city. The project is also has to mitigate their share of impacts. They also provided public art, a plaza, as well as seed money for a study to study in undercrossing on O'Neill Avenue. So the city received, I believe, almost $400,000 from them as part of that development agreement, so we could study creating another ped bike connection there at O'Neill underneath the Caltrain tracks. So that's 3 projects. Again, here's example of the city creating the opportunities, creating the policies, creating the climate for housing to be built. And some of it just happens. You know, Firehouse Square was in the works for a decade, city-owned property for exactly. I mean, going back to 2012, different developers, different scenarios, and we finally had the right mix of development of affordable, all affordable and market rate to make that happen. We had no idea that the Arts and Crossings project was going to come to us. This was a developer saying, I picked up a parcel and then another one and another one. They actually picked up one that was actually 2 of them that were in the unincorporated county area, and they melded them into that project to create roughly 2.2 acres for the 250 units. Okay, next slide. Question.
Wondering what the status of the school was, and that is there actually going to be an art school there for kids? That was my understanding of it when it was approved.
Well, they're not fully occupied yet. I think they are still working on some agreements with the Peninsula School of Art for use of that space. We could find we could follow up in terms of where it's at.
Up the gas station project, on El Camino, that old funky gas station's been abandoned for 50 years.
We're going to get to that. It's going to be on the next couple slides. Yeah. Not quite 150, but it's in the double digits, but not triple digits. Okay. So 3 different projects. This is one of them that you mentioned. The first one up top is actually 608 Harbor, and that is actually fully in the unincorporated Harbor Industrial Area. 103 units, 18 of them, I believe, are affordable. They received their approvals from the Planning Commission last summer. We just got the annexation component approved. So that project, again, was fully in the county, and now it's going to be in the city of Belmont's jurisdictional boundary. So that, I believe last week, the Board of Supervisors approved that annexation component. But that was under review for a couple of years, received their approvals, about 5 stories, 69 to 70 spaces there. Again, I know folks are going to probably go, oh, how did that happen? Well, again, state density bonus law applied. They're less than a half a mile from the train station, and they were not required to provide parking. They provided 69 to 70 spaces for that project. Next project going down below the middle one, that is Rome Development, 125 units, all affordable project. They have received all of their support funding from all of their agencies. They're on a tight timeline to get their building permits approved and their grading permits approved, because some of their funding has strings attached to it. You shall be under construction by a certain time period, and that time period is basically April of 2024. So when the city comes out of the grading moratorium, do folks know that between November to April, mid-April, you cannot grade because of stormwater conditions, grading a bunch of issues. But they aren't allowed to do grading during that time, but they're going to be pulling their permits for the construction start for that project. We're anticipating April or May of this year. So that is below the Vans. Do folks remember the Vans, which is now gone? Sorry. But right, so it's the Bel Mateo Motel site. Folks remember that site kind of going up the hill? So it's that site, it's about 1.5 acres. It also includes the parcel that's at El Camino as well, kind of a vacant lot there. But the Bel Mateo site will be demolished, and then 125 units will be built there. And again, 100% affordable project. 150 spaces within it. They have 2 or 3 levels of underground parking. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this project right there is 5 stories, and it's not all affordable. Again, there's some measure, there's 15% of them. The all affordable project, the middle one for the Bel Mateo site, it's 6 stories, 65 feet, I believe, at certain points. Again, going back to 678 Ralston, it is a unique project. And then because of the state density bonus law and SB 35, SB 35 did not apply to either of those 2 projects that I'm pointing to. The one below, they chose not to have the project processed under those conditions. Now, the Rome project, they did tap state density bonus law for certain components, certain exceptions relative to kind of architecture and height and that sort. So the project below, finally getting to your question, city-owned property on both sides of Hill Street and El Camino, that was approved in February of 2023. The developer is called Link, affordable housing developer out of the Los Angeles area. They've been working on this project for the better part 4 or 5 years. They do not have all of their support funding for it. Even though that they've received their approvals, they continue to go back and will be applying for other rounds of funding to support their project. 37 units spread over those 2 parcels. They're fairly small parcels. The project's about 5 stories in height for both of them. But again, in terms of when it could get under construction, we don't know yet. We have definitely some certainty on the Rome project because again, they have all of their funding and they have to get going on it in spring. In terms of the 608 Harbor, while they received their approvals last year, they haven't filed for construction permits yet. Once that happens, then we'll have a better idea of how they're going to advance for it. So it's on the corner of Harbor and Oak County. So there's a gas station there, used to be called, PF Flyers gas station. So it's, I don't think the gas station would get established somewhere else.
Can you estimate how many of all these projects total there are going to be, the number of units total?
Total? Well, 103 for the
Total. Yeah.
total.
So in our development pipeline, including the ones that are like almost fully built or finished, we have 1,000 units.
I know that.
How many new
There you go.
students coming to our school?
What now?
How many new students coming to our school?
I don't have an exact number for you.
Is that part of the mitigation that they're contributing to building one school, give a lot of impact?
They have to pay school impact fees for all of developments have to pay school impact fees.
Just to piggyback on the previous question about how many units.
Right.
So we're at about 1,000 in the state mandate is 1,700, so we can expect 700 more units to be able to meet that threshold.
It's not that we can expect it, it's that it's actually 1785, so closer to 800. We need 800 more units to meet their threshold.
So there's going to be more.
There very well could be
There
more,
could be.
but we don't control what comes in,
Correct.
right? So regardless of us needing 800 units to meet what the state wants us to have.
Right.
We have no ability to make that happen or not make it, it's sort of based on developer interest.
Correct.
And the city doesn't really have the jurisdiction to say where those units go. Right?
No.
Maybe way to make that smaller unit, I was thinking, it's on, I forget the gas station one. Is there any way to say that's only for nurses, fire, police, teachers that are in our community that are, because I understand it from talking to a local police officer, that the city of Belmont pays about somewhere between 50 and 100,000 to hire a new police officer to go through training, and then 2 years later, when he has a kid and a wife, they move away. So you spend all that money getting them, they can't afford to live here, and they continue to be far away. Are we gonna do anything to try to keep our local police, fire, teachers, et cetera, in our community, and maybe give them preferential for some of these units?
No, and is possible to have preference policies. You really can't make it like specific to Belmont, but, you know, it's possible to have like a preference policy for people that live and work within the county. And I know, that's something that could be explored.
Because Foster City did something just like that recently. I don't know if you heard about that project. I think it just happened last year. It was less than 50 units. It was small. That's why I'm thinking that small property might be a good fit for something like that.
It is possible. Yeah.
We'd love them to get all their support funding. That's the thing. Like I said, it's, well, there are projects there that there are certain affordable projects where the city does actually contribute funds, whether it's through like a loan, a long-term loan. In fact, that's certainly the case for the Rome project. The city has committed a loan for that project, and this property here for the Link project, we own the land for that. So we own the land for that, and we're also committing $1 million loan for that project. So that's, you know, some pretty significant contribution. So this project here for I'm sorry, this one right here. You can't see. Sorry.
The bottom two.
The bottom, yes, right,
We own the bottom.
right.
That land is ours, the bottom one, and then the one in the middle, we're contributing some funds to help make it happen.
The one next to Belmont Harbor, the one I'm talking about, the gas station.
That's the properties at the city of Belmont. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next one. Yes, yes. Okay, cool. Okay, folks know that Stanford is proposing to come to Belmont. They're proposing to do a conceptual development plan development change for the NDNU campus. They have a plan that was approved in 2000 for NDNU. It's like a 15 to 20-year master plan for additional buildings to be built over time. They didn't realize much of that plan. Stanford came to the city about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and they are interested in taking over the property, proposing a similar use, educational uses. They're proposing to go from what's allowed as part of that master plan for that property, about 400,000 square feet. Stanford's proposing to get to about 700,000 square feet. They're also proposing within that overall educational plan to have about 50 to 200 housing units in it. We're in a development agreement scenario with them, so we're working with them on their project in terms of what kinds of benefits could potentially be conferred as part of this kind of a project. It's a long-range plan. There are 3 historic buildings on the property that would be preserved, need to be preserved, but potentially every other building there could get taken down and replaced with a new building meeting Stanford's mission for their educational services for that property. We don't have any details whether it's going to be like a school of sustainability or a standalone, you know, university. Keep in mind, it's a much smaller property than Stanford, as you know, down in Palo Alto. It's about 47 acres.
Is that like a 10-year deal that they work with the city?
Could be any, well, typically development agreements have a minimum of 10 years, but typically like a master plan, you know, goes out 15 to 20 to 25 years. Yeah, so all the buildings wouldn't come down at once. You'd see them, you know, change over time. Right, but we're in that now. There's going to be environmental impact report. All that environmental assessment is going to be occurring later this summer. I know this says public hearing starting this summer, probably going to be towards the latter part of the year. But again, that's another project that the city is working on. You like that one? Let me guess. How many high rises? I can tell you that the conceptual development plan that Stanford proposes has like 4 different zones in the campus, and they range anywhere in height from 50 to about 75 feet. So, and again, it does propose some changes to the circulation within the campus, again, creating 4 different quadrants. And again, they haven't defined the exact nature as to when the building or which buildings come down and when, but certainly they have zones of areas where they think that the building intensity would be of this amount, like 50 feet here, up to 75 feet here, and that sort of thing. So, we have a web page and a website for it. If folks are interested, you can get lots of information on that project. Okay. Oh, you have a question? Yes.
I think you said 250 housing units. in that Stanford one. And those are student housing, I assume. Can those be counted in your low affordable?
That's a tricky one because there's already housing on that campus now. So there's anywhere from 350 to 400, whether it's dorms, units. So in terms of the net increase of housing units, we probably aren't going to get,
Going down.
we potentially might be going down in terms of,
And then also under state law, they don't count like student housing.
Right.
So it's, yeah.
I mean, 800 is a lot of homes, especially if you're getting only 17 there, and, you know, I mean, I know that 9-story one's gonna be a lot, but still, it's ridiculous what the state's asking.
we aren't alone. Okay, so let's move on to some biotech projects. Again, I'm not sure if it's going to create the same amount of excitement, but maybe. So a couple of projects of note. And again, this is something that we were surprised of. Well, we knew that biotech life sciences certainly has a push and a stronghold within the peninsula, but had not been happening within the city of Belmont. But now we have 4 different projects that have been filed with the city, a total of 2.5 million square feet of biotech life sciences. Carrie, you have your hand up. Question?
All right, the question on the Stanford project.
Okay, sure.
So the question is, Stanford has a no net new peak hour trip standard that they have to comply with at their main campus. Will the city consider something similar for this site, since it's on Ralston and that's a huge increase in square feet?
I can tell you that the traffic analysis that's been going on for this project has been exhaustive. We are keenly aware of those issues related to the traffic impacts that they would create as part of the increase of their project allowances from 400,000 to 700,000. We have the applicant's traffic impact study. It's being analyzed by city traffic analysis firms. We have an environmental review consultant that's in the throes of preparing the environmental impact report. Traffic will be a highlighted feature. Certainly want to look at whether it's improvements to the entrance of the campus, in and out of the campus. We're taking that tremendously seriously as well. But again, in terms of the nuances, the various components, the mitigations, they haven't been developed yet, but it's something that we're studying intently.
I have a comment for that, because when I was running for city council, I actually met with the Stanford people, and some of the mitigating things that they were considering are giving everybody passes to get on the train to get here, and then having some kind of shuttle pick them up from Caltrans to take them there, so there's not so much of an impact on the car. So that's in discussion, or it's just a thought, it's not definite, but that's something they're talking about, because I said it's a huge concern for us to live here, too many cars, how are you gonna mitigate that? And that's what was brought up to me.
Right. Certainly shuttles or other components could be considered. Again, when some of these large scale biotech life sciences projects, if they were to come to fruition, they could potentially also include those same kind of contributions or funds towards let's say a shuttle program. But let's start in the corner. In fact, I'm going to do this for the folks that are here. So if you go to that top portion, that top right portion, that's the Island Parkway development. That's the former Oracle lands. As you know, Oracle has left. I mean, they still have some buildings, but a company called Biomed Realty has purchased those properties. It included 2 different buildings, as well as about 6 acres of land as well. They're proposing in the neighborhood of 800,000 square feet for biotech commercial office. It's a campus. There's 4 buildings, so 3 buildings, as well as a parking structure. And they've been in our fold for about a year now. They're under review. It's a complex project. It will require some zoning text amendments, rezoning, general plan as well. Oracle had a previous master plan approval for those buildings and that site that allowed in the neighborhood of like 400,000 square feet. And this proposal takes the overall square footage for the project to about 800,000 square feet. So that's project number 1. That's Island Parkway area. And then it's probably a little bit less. Those buildings are in the neighborhood of like 10 to 12 stories. And this project, I think the tallest building hits, I believe, 9 or 10 stories. So that's the top one. There's a question. Yes. Only small components of Oracle are in Belmont. The line, those large towers that you see beyond that to the east, that's in Redwood City. Yeah. Yeah, so the Oracle had two different buildings that were in Belmont, and technically one of them, while it looked like it was in Belmont, it was actually on the Redwood City, actually in Redwood City. But these folks have, like I said, Biomed Realty has purchased all of these properties that are in Belmont proper, and they're proposing this project.
We love the improvement that happened at the Belmont Sports Complex and all of the kids that now can play year round on that. The parking lot, I think, belongs to Oracle, is that right?
No, the parking lot that's paved, that paved portion, that's owned by the city of Belmont. The dirt one is owned by Oracle, actually. Oh, I'm sorry, owned by Biomed Realty now, because they own the property. And again, they are working with the city on this master plan. It does include potentially some improvements to the city's parking lot, as well as their parking structure is actually required to provide 80 spaces minimum for public use as well. So.
I was gonna say, drive by there on the weekend, but I'm very, also, that dirt lot is full.
Yeah, if I can just note that Biomed Realty came to the last meeting that we had, and so we do have their whole presentation and all the details from that on the YouTube for here, and then we had sent out some of that summary. So all that detail is in that presentation.
Cool. So I'm going to stop talking about that one. I'm going to move to the next one. The one directly below that, that is 601 Harbor. That is exclusively in the Harbor Industrial Area. So that's another project that the city has been collaboratively working with the County of San Mateo to allow us to process the entitlements and the environmental review for it. But that's 375,000 square feet, biotech life sciences. Don't worry about parking, because they're providing almost 950 spaces in 3 levels of parking below. We are probably anticipating public hearings for that project in maybe late spring. We are working on a development agreement with the developer for it. Should everything be cleared and approved, then this property, it's actually a collection of 5 parcels, would then be annexed to the city of Belmont. And that would be the last one that would be annexed to us under this kind of interim phase. Because when I get to the Harbor Industrial Specific Plan, that's going to be the precursor to wholesale annexation of the rest of the Harbor Industrial Area. But again, that's 4 stories, nice public plaza area, public improvements around it. They also, as part of their development agreement with the city, would be responsible for upgrading the sewer line along Harbor Boulevard to not only account for the impacts that they would create, but also other developers. So they would fund actually upgrades that anticipates what level of additional development may occur within Harbor Boulevard, and then other developers, should they propose to build, they'd have to pay into a reimbursement agreement for that work.
Where on Harbor is that?
So this one's on the other side. I mean, you guys remember that housing project at 608, the 103 units? This is across the street on the south side. So on the corner of Harbor and Old County, there's a couple of automotive uses there. There's like an enterprise rent-a-car. So there's a collection of like 5 parcels. I want to say that's about 2+ acres as well.
It's on the backside by the Belmont.
It's framed by Belmont Creek, correct?
So, yeah, so I'm very familiar with Belmont Creek and the regular flooding that occurs there.
We're talking infrastructure. Yes.
It would be really intelligent to ask that this development contribute to the flooding that occurs there, that spills all the way down in Harbor, that overflows on Industrial Road, and devastates that area. Last year, obviously, it was a huge storm, but that even spilled across. Yeah, a huge area.
Like other developments, they have to mitigate their impacts related to stormwater, flooding, sewer. They're going to be contributing to those solutions. Keep in mind that the city also works with the county and works with other agencies to address cleanup of the creek. We also have, and this will be part of that March discussion, I hope, when Peter Brown is here, we're going to talk about projects like the city's Twin Pines Park Detention Basin project, which can address stormwater, and flooding. The battery. Maybe that's a good thing. Yeah, right? You gonna swap it out? Damn. Okay, all right. Good stuff. That project is going to address flooding issues upstream from the area, from Water Dog Lake, and then also within the areas of Twin Pines Park. So we want to address it west, as well as these projects need to be addressing their own individual impacts. And they have to contribute to cleanup and maintenance of the creek. Because do folks know that the creek, Belmont Creek, is not owned by the city of Belmont, nor the county of San Mateo? It's actually owned by the property owners halfway on either side. So take a line down the middle of the creek, and the property owners on the south in San Carlos own the creek on their end, and on the north on Harbor, they own the creek as well. So they're responsible for maintenance. Hopefully I answered your question. Okay, last one. I know. I mean, you guys are asking questions, so I'm going to keep going. Last one right here. That is 1301 Shoreway Road. That is actually a pretty large property, about 7 acres of land. UC Berkeley Extension used to be in there. There's a couple other there's Extended Stay of America is across the street, so it's that commercial office building there. They've proposed a project of, oh boy, I'm forgetting, it's 500,000 square feet of biotech life sciences, 3 different buildings, 2 office buildings, as well as a parking structure. They're currently under review right now. We're about to start the environmental review for the project. There will be potentially a development agreement that gets struck for that project. They're working on public improvements as well, both in the site, adjacent to the creek. Parking, boy, pretty significant. I want to say in the 800 to 900 space range for that project as well. So that's biotech project number 3. Again, a lot of this stuff wasn't even on our radar 2 or 3 years ago, and now it's all being filed. So last one is 425, 435 Harbor. So this is at the end of Harbor. So Harbor and Industrial, 3 different parcels, 5.5 acres total. That project was just filed about 2 or 3 months ago. So I can't remember the businesses that it affects, but again, it's 800,000 square feet plus 7 to 8 stories, 3 floors of underground parking as well. Again, also proposed for biotech life sciences. Just getting started on the review for that project. Yeah, so it's on the corner of Harbor and Industrial. So head east on Harbor. So yes, so across the street from those county buildings. So the other side, so the south side of Harbor as you transition to Industrial Road. So that's 4 projects, 2.5 million square feet, 2.5 million square feet that we did not anticipate 2 or 3 years ago.
You get them from going on the Camino, is that understanding? No, I mean, the people that work there aren't gonna get to go to the Camino, increasing traffic.
They aren't. I would. You're teasing? Okay, all right. I guess I'm just clenching up with all the questions. Okay. Yeah.
There's an off-ramp on the harbor. That's the speed.
Right.
I'm just wondering if a new on-ramp will be put on so that people will be able to get off of there and head north or south as opposed to.
That is probably a,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's close.
Well, and also too, because folks have asked that question. Maybe these folks should fund a new kind of overpass so that you go eastbound Harbor that then can take you to northbound 101. That is probably a $250 million project. Is massive.
But I guess the place that we would all come from is as nice as it is to be able to expand and get this tax base, it seems irresponsible to allow all this building without figuring out how it's gonna impact the entire community if we involve in that.
Part of the same calculus with the housing projects, that again, aren't the all affordable ones, but the same calculus is they have to manage their share of impacts, both through impact fees as well as the mitigations that they need to incorporate as part of their project.
I think we're all looking forward to seeing the traffic plan that goes with all of these projects.
And so are we,
Before they should go.
before they get built. Yeah.
Sorry, another question.
Another question.
So, so in terms of the comprehensive traffic planning that's being done with the Stanford project, and it sounds like there's a lot of investment in looking at that. Is there, instead of project by project, is there a comprehensive plan being looked at for east of El Camino Real? Because so many of these projects are coming up on this side. In terms of a comprehensive traffic.
Well,
study.
we have comprehensive master plans for whether it's sewer, whether it's traffic. I'd have to get into the nuts and bolts. I'd have to, again, I can't.
But there's none that are
Right.
planned.
You guys are getting tired of me. I can tell. Yeah. Okay.
No, but there's none, like, there's none that are planned, or how often is? does
Well,
that-
we have a 5-year rolling capital improvement plan. It gets adopted every year as part of our city budget. And that does look at the whole slate of projects, whether it's sewer, traffic, storm drain, parks, and other services. The city does have a Ralston corridor master plan. I'm not sure if folks remember that. It was adopted in 2014. And it has various segments of work. In fact, work has already occurred on a few of those segments, and there's more that is due to be built. I think we've completed segment 2. I think we're starting to work on segment 3, and it does include improvements. So that could be considered a master plan, certainly for Ralston, and that's on our website. If you just want to take a look at it, you can see the various components that make up that plan.
And then the other question, sorry, there's another question from Zoom, which is, we often hear in the news that many office spaces remain vacant in various cities across the US, including San Francisco. I want to know if there is a demand for 2.5 million square feet of new biotech office space. Can the city share those studies that were conducted to demonstrate the demand for these spaces?
Want to take over?
That's a good.
So is there demand for 2.5 million square feet of biotech? I'm skeptical. I think, a lot of these projects, they're moving forward and getting their planning approvals. The timeline under which they're going to be built is very much up in the air. So some of these may get planning approvals and wait 5 years to be built. Some of them might never get built. I would be surprised if any of these projects, given the current market conditions and everything that we're all probably seeing the same newspaper articles. So I don't think that any of these are coming down hot and heavy and will be built in the short term. The city, we cannot require that there's market demand for space to let someone build it. It's really the investment decision of the developer and the private property owner, and they make those calculations themselves. And if space gets built and it's not occupied, again, the city has no control over that happening, but it's very expensive to build that, and no one's going to fund that construction unless there's market demand for that space. But it often happens during periods where there's low market demand that people do plan for the future when that may turn and change. So, yes, we're definitely in a period where there's a lot of vacant office spaces, even biotech buildings that are recently built are not being leased up, but that doesn't mean that that won't change in 5 or 10 years.
Sorry, one more question from Zoom. Are we communicating or planning with San Carlos in a coordinated effort for HIA, the Harbor Industrial Area, or do we look
Yes.
only at this for North?
Yes. So San Carlos has a northeast area plan that they're also putting together, which is a much larger area than the unincorporated HIA specific plan about to get to. But yes, we are in close coordination with them as to goals, policies, objectives, outcomes, traffic, all of that.
Traffic, since we're all talking about traffic, I know that before they started building that skating rink project, when I used to take my daughter to Central School, because there wasn't any room in Nesbit at the time, they didn't have that red shores. But anyways, you would come down the end of Marine View here, and the cars would be backed up all the way to Marine View. And part of it's because they've made this sidewalk so large on the right-hand side, you basically only have 3 cars that can turn right from Old County onto Ralston. I get the idea, we want to make more space for walkers and bikers, but at the expense of 50 cars backing up down the road because they can't turn right, I think that would alleviate a lot of the problem, because especially with this new apartment that just got built, however, 177 units, it might be good to rethink maybe adding an extra 6 feet and taking off a sidewalk that's big enough for a truck to go through. There's not that many walkers on that side of the road. I think if we widened that, we could have more people turning right to go to middle school, to go to Central, to just go to the right. There's a lot of cars waiting there because they're backed up, 50 cars all in the green. So that, I think, would help alleviate that problem.
Similar response, duly noted, part of the traffic analysis of everything that we're looking at. You didn't have a question, did you? No. Well, hey, I'm
worried about you too.
my time. Hey, like I said, I'm here all night. I'm gonna hit like Taco Bell on the way home. It's gonna be great. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Yeah, let's keep going. Well, that's not. Dip your server. I'm here all week. Okay, so long-range plans, we're almost there. So just a quick refresh, and I know there was the question, a while back, back about an hour ago. We had our 2017 general plan, 2035 general plan that was, again, reviewed through the cycle 2014 to 2017. Just giving you kind of an example of this is the city's general plan map, and these are the areas in red are the areas where we anticipated 5, 6, 7 years ago that was going to be the change areas. And that's starting to come to fruition. We're starting to see the areas that's the area in purple is our Belmont Village specific plan area. We're seeing some housing projects being proposed there. The area kind of south of there along El Camino Real, and then the area that's kind of hatched, that's the Harbor Industrial area. And then across the freeway, we anticipate change there as well. I mentioned 1301 Shoreway. And then the area that's the circle on the top, that's the Island Parkway area. And lo and behold, we have Island Parkway project there. So we anticipated housing coming to the city. We didn't anticipate the level of biotech office, but these were the areas in the city where we thought, going back 5, 6, 7 years ago, this is probably where the development activity is going to be occurring. So it just gives you some context as to the thinking that was in play a couple of years back. Now we're getting to the Harbor Industrial Area. As folks hopefully know, it's unincorporated San Mateo County, between 62 and 65 acres. It does include the mobile home park, commercial offices, industrial uses. It's in the city's sphere of influence. The area to the south was also Harbor Industrial Area under the county, but that got annexed to San Carlos back in the 1990 to 1997 time period. The conditions have not always been great for the city to talk about the opportunities for annexation and development in that area. Probably this is the best time that we've seen over the last few years. We have property owner participation. Folks are liking what they're seeing relative to Belmont and its leadership, the policies that we're enacting, that it is a unique time period for us to advance forward and bring a long-term master plan, to bring a long-term land use plan for this area to consider redevelopment, as well as preservation of existing businesses, as well as creating opportunities for improved traffic, improved streets, walkability, bikes, landscaping, public spaces. And that's part of this master plan, kind of like the Belmont Village specific plan and the general plan. This is a long range plan. It looks out 10 to 15 to 25 years. So we started this effort about a year ago. We've kind of made it through the initial research and outreach phase, and now we're starting to get into goals, policies, and objectives and land use considerations. So the next couple of slides will make that hopefully clear. This gives you some context as to the area of the harbor and the unincorporated area as it relates to the other area that's highlighted to the north. That's the Belmont Village Specific Plan area. And then your homeowners associations are just directly to the north of the area. We get about 65 acres, and we're working on this land use plan. So land use considerations, what are we thinking about? Well, we certainly want to preserve the mobile home park community. That's an important asset. You have 80 to 100 families that live there. It actually provides that level of affordable housing for folks. It's important. It should be preserved. The city has the intentions, absolutely, of creating the zoning to kind of mirror the county zoning. The county of San Mateo has its zone as mobile home park. The city wants to advance on that same kind of ideal of preserving it as a mobile home park. The other kinds of things that we're thinking about with this plan is considering the existing land uses and development standards and how we formulate them, you know, whether it's building heights, use, frontage requirements, activation of the streets, creating some more improved sidewalk frontage. We certainly want to have the diversification of employment opportunities. We're kind of seeing it in real time. If folks remember the projects that I'm talking about, this is kind of an interesting thing that doesn't happen all the time in kind of, you know, planning world. Is usually you prepare a long-term land use plan and then the projects come. Well, we're actually preparing this plan at the same time as projects being proposed within it. Two of those projects that I mentioned, the one on the corner, 601 Harbor, as well as the other one at the other corner of Harbor and Industrial. Both of those projects have been proposed and are under review at the same time as the master plan being proposed for this area. We certainly want to activate ground floors along Harbor Boulevard. We think that's important. We want to have good design standards that generate activity for these building frontages. Land use alternatives, they aren't significantly different than what exists today. The area defined in orange is an area for mixed use and housing. It's already zoned for housing as well. We certainly want to keep that opportunity there for those two parcel blocks. That kind of upper orange parcel block is almost exclusively taken by that Artisan Crossings 250 units. That kind of smaller block below it, the lowest portion of that block is that project that I mentioned before, 103 units, 608 Harbor, and then there's kind of a middle component is about 2 acres where we think that is certainly appropriate for us to continue to allow mixed use and residential. Everything else at this point, the areas denoted in green would be a premium for industrial and commercial use. And then the area in blue, again, is the preservation area that we're wanting to maintain for the mobile home park. And again, we're still at the very early stages. We're just starting to talk about land use alternatives. We just had a meeting this last Tuesday with our city council to kind of talk this through. The council is certainly receptive to the components that we're talking about at this point. Connections. We aren't prescribing any new streets as part of this master plan. We're taking some cues that we heard from San Carlos with the Northeast plan. I know that they proposed some new streets throughout their plan area. That did not resonate well with certainly property owners there. We think it's hard to imagine a new street, but we do want to create the opportunity for connections. We don't have it defined yet, but we're certainly wanting to create a couple of east-west connections as well as a north-south connection. And it's not going to be for automobile. It's more going to be like paseos, bike areas, walkway areas that might start at a certain point to the east and end to the west, but we haven't defined it yet. We're thinking it should be flexible based upon the development patterns that get proposed as a result of this plan. Yep, that's connections. Project schedule. So again, we're about a year into the project, just starting with goals, policies, and objectives now. We've done a lot of outreach, a lot more to be done. We're about to start the environmental component of this review project. And we're going to be doing that in the spring and into the summer. Certainly going to be some check-ins and public hearings for that. but our schedule has this project going for kind of final review and adoption generally this time next year. So a lot of work ahead of us in 2024 to create this land use master plan for the harbor. And then it serves as a precursor to the overall annexation of that area. This needs to be done before the city can consider working with the property owners and the county to then have this entire 65 acres then move over from county jurisdiction to city jurisdiction. There's a lot of work that's entailed on annexations. I mean, property tax sharing agreements, infrastructure analysis, it is daunting. Again, so happy that Kathy's joined the city. She's got some experience in that to help us with it. So that's the Harbor Industrial Area specific plan. Look out for that. We have a website for it. You could sign up for email lists and alerts whenever the project is going to be featured before decision makers, whenever we do notifications for meetings and environmental work and the like. Question?
There's two from Zoom, so
Okay.
the first, is can the city plan for a mix of commercial and single family home development in HIA?
Well, certainly in the orange area, that's clearly an area where we anticipate housing. There's already housing that's been approved there, housing that's constructed there. Whether we're going to consider other zoning for housing within those big, large green areas remains to be seen, but our first pass of this is within the orange areas.
And then the second question is, will the master plan for HIA include opening the gates of O'Neill in the Homeview neighborhood?
That feels like a third rail issue, right? We certainly know that is creates tremendous concern. We certainly want to make sure that impacts are minimal. It's not under consideration. Certainly not at this time. We certainly want to get input from you. I would imagine that it would be a resounding, please don't open it up.
There's consensus.
Yeah, there's consensus. We get it. Don't do it. Show of hands. Don't do it. Everyone in Homeview, we get it. We get it. No thanks. Right. Well, certainly, like you have 250 within one chunk, 103 in another, and the other middle orange chunk could probably accommodate anywhere from 200 to 300 units. So
Get all the 800 right there in that big giant green chunk.
You just have to talk to that developer.
got it. Again, we aren't the developer. The development community has to participate with us in that. So. Okay, so any other questions on Zoom? Couple more questions over here.
What year did you say the annexation came up? In the 90s?
Yes, so, yeah.
Why didn't Belmont annex that time?
Oh, we could spend hours talking about that. It was you were here, yes, it was, and I started in 2000, so we had just kind of come out of that time period. I would say there was concerns from the property owners that were in the unincorporated area about being resistive to annexation. I think they had concerns about the city, whether it's leadership, whether it's policies, whether it's overall concerns about service provision for them. And the climate was just not right. And I'm being politically correct in saying that it just wasn't the right time for it to happen. And I've been working on this HIA area in terms of facilitating, whether it's meetings, discussions, working with property owners, groups, and I think the ownership now of those 65 acres, they're feeling a lot better about where the city of Belmont is going. So it's a real unique opportunity for us. You don't have 65 acres that comes into your fold very often. I mean, it happened. I mean, it's kind of a decades, I mean, like a generational thing. They jumped on it right away and we did not. So anyway, the opportunity is here. We're hoping folks can agree with us that this is a good thing for us to be pursuing. We think it's important, and we think it's important to have a vision for this area and what we think it would be, and then working with the county and property owners to make that land come into our fold. So, tax dollars could be significant, you bet.
And the development's probably gonna happen one way or another, right?
Right.
So
Might as well.
what if it's in Carlos, still the same traffic impact of those streets, but we would do the tax dollars for the.
Exactly. So let's have it in our city, so we get it right.
We had an opportunity to have Oracle and all that area, I heard years ago before I went.
Oh, yeah.
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 Yeah, you guys know that Oracle used to be off of Davis Drive. Did you guys know that they got their start off of Davis Drive and they wanted to expand? And there were challenges at the time in terms of where they could do it. And they moved to Redwood Shores. So
Couldn't we, before, we could have annexed that.
there was opportunities in the past. So again,
Let's not miss this one.
let's not miss this one, exactly. So hopefully that answered your question about why it didn't happen. The timing and conditions just weren't right, so.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Oh, sounds like we have another question. One more?
I'm just,
Last one.
I'm being told there's a question from Kelly on Zoom about the developers of the HIA saying they were gonna cut down they were gonna plant the trees that were cut down. There's,
I see it.
Yeah.
only integrated brighter LED lighting. The neighbors living on the southeast end of the Homeview neighborhoods have lit up bedrooms at night right now. Who's gonna follow up on the planting of those trees?
We'd be happy to follow up with the county, because right now it's still under county jurisdiction. I do remember that occurring. Wasn't the most shining moment in terms of clarity related to to the owner of that property, but it did occur. A number of trees came down. Because it wasn't in our jurisdiction, we didn't have the authority to enforce it or enforce mitigation plantings. I am familiar with the ownership group there. Whether they're proposing something long-term for redevelopment and will include some additional trees or buffer or other things remains to be seen. But we could certainly carry the message of, boy, that really didn't resonate well with the community.
Do you anticipate the plan, will it be so granular that we'll have height limits for each of those designations?
Absolutely.
Something longer that's gonna be down the road that we'll have an opportunity to comment on those very specific.
It's going to be a specific plan that not only has kind of long-range planning ideals, but also on-the-ground zoning as well. Heights, parking requirements, architectural design standards, streetscape improvements, its design, open space, public connections, all of it. So think of our Belmont Village specific plan and also the complementary Belmont Village zoning. It's going to have the same aspects of that.
Thank you.
Question, but just as you're planning this, like as the property over here will come down, like we're losing the Indian restaurant and, I know the Japanese, I don't know about the Japanese one, but, I would love to see some restaurants stay if they're being, or put back in.
So would I. I like eating.
I mean, and then it
Yeah.
because you walk to the restaurants.
The problem is the cost of what they're paying now and what's the new building's gonna be in. And it's a long time. A lot of people have already left that thinking it's gonna happen early. They're empty already, a lot of them.
And that's not unique to Belmont. I mean, folks, and I don't want to say COVID, but hasn't everything changed within the last 4 years? I mean, costs are up, interest rates are up, businesses trying to survive. It's more of a challenge, and it's just unfortunate. We certainly want to encourage preservation of businesses. We want to encourage livelihood. We want to encourage activity, places for folks to be. And we'll do our best to try and create the environment for that to occur. But sometimes market conditions also then create that sadness of folks not being there.
Okay, what's going in the Booker's Pies place?
It's going to be a restaurant, bakery kind of use. So it's going to be that same use. So they've poured a lot of capital into that property. Okay. How are we feeling? Think we're done? I think we're done, right? Okay. Sure. Thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
All right. So I do want to thank both Carlos and Kathy, there were a lot of comments thanking you all on the Zoom and then from all of you. In terms of the next steps, our next meeting is in March. I'm working closely with Noreen and Mike, and if we already have Peter on tap to come because obviously infrastructure and public works is a huge part of this conversation. But if you want parks or the schools or anybody else, please talk to us so that we know. And then if you have additional questions, the city's always been really good about following up with us and getting more answers so we can send those out to you all. So you can also email me or Noreen and we'll collect those, pass it on to the city and try to get that out, whatever we can, information ahead of time to you all so that you don't feel that the questions or things have to wait till March. But we just want you to know that there will be another forum like this for more dialogue, okay? So those are the next steps, and it's been a long night. Thanks to everybody, okay?
We'll get a copy of that PowerPoint, make it a file that we can share to everybody.
Thank you
Yep.
for setting us up.
Yep. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.